What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of KingPilled. I am live here in an exclusive members-only stream with good friend of the show, Emergent Perspective, coming back for round 2 of our conversation about the Hanseatic League. What's going on, man?
Hey, not too much. It was really good stream last time, and I think we've got some good follow-on topics, and I think we've got some very interesting current events to kind of work into this discussion.
Absolutely. It's very, for those who are listening later on, we're still reeling. The country is still reeling from the aftermaths of Hurricane Helene, which is probably something that's going to be going on for years. And Hurricane Milton is now bearing down on Florida. And I have a sister who lives in East Central Florida. She's going to college down there. So I'm particularly focused on this one. I'm going to be driving across country, leaving tomorrow, going to pick up Cooper, and we're going to an undisclosed location for the beginning process of building something really cool that I think you guys are going to really enjoy. So I'm recording this episode now on Monday. The plan is to drop this one of the days later this week to fill in for the fact that I won't be doing an Astro label. I'm on the road. So if you're hearing this later on and you wanted to have watched it live and participated in the live chat, then there's a couple of ways you could do that. Number one would be becoming a YouTube channel member. You have to do it from a desktop. You can't do it from an app. But if you go to YouTube, the channel is KingPilled, and you sign up there, you can become a channel member. It's only $5 a month, and you get early access to these exclusive members-only streams. Or the better thing to do would be to go to the KingPilled Discord. Costs a little bit more money, but you get a whole lot more for your money. And for the second time now, it looks like it's working. I'm streaming into our private Telegram group that I created as a little workaround so that I'm not having to charge people twice who are already supporting us enthusiastically in the Discord. So I'll do the normal housekeeping stuff. If you're watching live right now, then do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you are listening to this after the fact on the podcast, on podcatcher of choice or on YouTube, then like, subscribe, leave a comment. If it's on YouTube, leave us a 5-star rating and review for the podcatchers. That helps us get this out to more people. And you can go to kingpilled.substack.com. You can subscribe there as well to the KingPilled Substack, where more stuff will be coming soon, and you also get early access to other content. So we're filling up all the different channels. Let us discuss the Hanseatic League. So real quick, for those who may have missed the first conversation or haven't gone back and listened to it, which I do encourage you to go listen to it. It dropped last week while I was up in the Seattle area. It's called Elon Musk is a one-man Hanseatic League. Do us a favor, man, and remind us what the Hanseatic League is. Give us the quick rundown on that.
Okay, we'll just revisit very quickly, and actually pulling up if you can pull up on your stream on that map of it, would be a good visual aid for the audience. So the Hanseatic League was a medieval commerce, trading, and semi-defensive alliance that existed for several centuries in Northern Europe along the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. It actually existed from the 12th century to almost the 16th century, so about 400 years. And it was started as a loose alliance of trade cities, ports, ship captains, craftsmen who worked the docks, and all of the economic activity associated with it. And interestingly enough, they got to a point, this was a body that never had no central treasury, no central administrative body. They would call together a council every few years occasionally, but there was no strict formal leadership. There was no CEO. They had no standing army, although there were times when they contracted with mercenaries or even with other member states or whatnot, and spanned about 12 different countries. So kind of there's the rundown. I'll just read this quick summary. So Hanseatic League is a powerful multinational economic political alliance. And they became unchallengeable because withdrawal of their services or even just toning it down could cause major economic disruption or put major political and economic pressure on any of the countries that they were part of. So they range from London to northern France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Poland, all the way over to Russia, Sweden, Finland. And so simply if somebody became belligerent towards them or their members, they could simply withdraw their economic support. And there's a really interesting current parallel of look at the threatened strike by the longshoremen on the East Coast. They're saying, look, if we don't get the raises and the guarantees against automation that we want, we can simply withdraw our services. And there's about $5 billion plus in downstream economic activity that depends, and these are just guys that unload ships, right? So the concept was like that, but a little bit more wide and more distributed. And at one point in their history, they actually had veto power over, I believe it was the crowns of Sweden and Denmark. The League could effectively veto whoever these two kingdoms chose as king if they didn't approve. And that's real power.
So they were effectively like a union, except at the city level instead of the individual level.
Sure, and it started out the sort of, if it had a center, the major city was Lubeck, but there were other port cities that participated, and it started out with just a few different trade routes and trade channels. But then as other people in other cities saw, oh, well, that's really interesting. If you can dominate that one trade route, and you can take this approach of we will shut down the trade route if the crown pisses us off, right? People said, oh, well, why don't we do that with our smaller trade route? And it slowly evolved into this. It was a fairly informal arrangement to begin with that over the years kind of formalized, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So this is, we talked about how Elon is basically beginning to become this one-man Hanseatic League, where he's kind of like the Schelling point that everything is centering around. And but someone might critique, like you mentioned in the DMs afterwards, someone might critique, and they may say, well, this sort of decentralization and being functional and operational and stuff like that, it's not possible anymore. The regime is too powerful, or there's it's just not conceivable anymore for whatever reason to actually function at a decentralized level like this. The internet has centralized things too much, yada, yada, yada. Like, there's a bunch of different ways people might critique it. But you shared with me a story that actually illustrates why we have a Hanseatic League effectively in existence right now.
Sure.
So why don't you, well, I'll read the thing here for people who are listening and not looking. For this is from Cliff Maloney. He said, breaking, Airbnb host evicts the Pennsylvania Chase team in Philly. Quote, this is how you know the PA Chase is over the target. Being discriminated against in Philadelphia is nothing new for conservatives, Cliff Maloney, PA Chase founder, told Breitbart News. Democrats are furious that we're finally fighting fire with fire and beating them at their own game. So this is from a headline. This is exclusive. Airbnb host evicts pro-Trump ballot chasers in Philadelphia. And he says, to be clear, one, the Airbnb host became irate when he learned the PA Chase is knocking for the GOP ticket. Number two, our Philly team is knocking in Bucks County. Number three, we did not lose any door knocking productivity because we rebooked immediately. Number four, we will reach our goal of knocking on 500,000 doors. And then you can go to phchase.com if you want to help them push back against this thuggery and sponsor a ballot chaser. So connect this to the Hanseatic League for us.
So the kind of the following conversation we had there was, of course, people might say, oh, well, this is decentralized. So a couple of things. First of all, the Hanseatic League and the decentralized approach is not exclusive. And even at the time, it was not exclusive with any other form of organization. There were people who were members of the League who were sitting government officials, the city council of Lubeck. They were city council members. They were owners or workers in any of these trade companies that supported the League's activity. And so there was nothing about, you didn't have to quit your day job to be a member of the League, so to speak, right? So there's the first thing, is that it's not exclusive with anything else you do. It's simply a circle of association. The second part is that it was a loose circle of associations that existed at multiple levels. You might form a local group if you were part of a trading company or a company that provides dock services or ship repair or unloading services. You might form your own local group within the League, but that's not exclusive with, you might form your own local dock worker coalition, but then you might have a regional coalition of dock workers, in your region or country, and then you had a greater coalition across the 10 to 12 countries that the league comprises, right? I mean, I've seen people relate that back to today, I mean, how many times have we shared stories about freedom and free speech with the Brits, with the Argentinians, with the Brazilians, with people in Venezuela, with, people in Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong protesters. You don't have to go join some formal organization to support that cause. And that support could be money or donations, or it could simply be, I'm going to take my 50,000 or 100,000 or multi-million, social media following and shine a light on this issue. Right.
Right.
So I think what we get from that is that, one, it's not an exclusive approach with anything else you do. And the other thing I would say is, if somebody says, well, this is not practical, this is not, well, at the time the Hanseatic League existed for 400 years and they didn't have any internet. Right.
Right. Yeah. So what happens when the Hanseatic League meets the network state?
They didn't have an internet. Right.
Right.
It was trade and messages and travel, and dock workers sail from one city or one country to another, and they land in that port for a couple of days, and they go to the local tavern and they just say, hey, here's what's happening in my city, what are you guys dealing with? Right. If they can come together with a coalition, and I think that's going to be somewhat of a key to this, is not just taking let's get on social media and tweet about stuff. Although, don't get me wrong, that's a very important part of this. But it also is, Elon has said things like, oh, hey, I tweeted out this information, I tweeted out this post, but tell all your offline friends, tell your friends, tell your family, go have a conversation with somebody at work and tell them, did you know about this crazy thing? Right. So I think it is an approach that ultimately is going to have to encompass. It's not going to be exclusive to everyone's day job, nor is it going to be exclusive to the online world or the offline world. And I'd also say, we talked a bit in the last one about Freemasonry as a network that existed over the ages in a very similar fashion. And the founding fathers arranged the Boston Tea Party in a tavern. They put out the word with horseback riders, right? So I think if this can be done in earlier eras of history with much lower levels of technology, then I think it certainly can succeed in the modern day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anything, it should be, in some senses, it should be even easier now.
Really, it should be. And I think we also have there's kind of a generation of tools that's kind of at the edge of public awareness. We're all familiar with big centralized, big tech, social media type platforms, but there's also, for those that follow or know about crypto, there's cryptocurrency, there's smart contracts, there's DAOs, there's, as you mentioned, Balaji's network state concept. Look into those things and you'll find that there is like a whole extra generation of tools that goes beyond what we're currently doing, that kind of extends this concept. And as we have, more political strife, more economic strife, I think those things are going to form, and they already are forming, kind of a catalyst that accelerates people into these things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the last episode I mentioned this article that I wrote that's on my Twitter at Real KingPilled, talking about secret societies, and you mentioned Freemasons. And one thing that characterizes secret societies is often things like secret codes or secret handshakes, or wearing a particular brand in a particular way, or something that is going to appeal to the in group, but either not appeal to the out group, or the out group just isn't even going to be aware of it at all. And the first thing that comes to mind when I start thinking about that here in this context is dark mega. That was something that Elon even said in his rally with Trump. The first thing he did is he came out and he said, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA. And MAGA even itself was almost like a prelude to this. Having a political movement that forms around a brand like that then lays the groundwork for dark MAGA, which now becomes a thing where, like, when you see someone with a dark MAGA profile picture, you can know pretty clearly that they are at least tangentially one of our guys. Because there's such a strong disgust response associated with it to anyone who's an enemy, and it's something that people, like, they lean into. They want to identify with this brand, and so now it becomes a way that you can start coordinating in public for things like, I don't know, providing disaster relief for a community that's been abandoned by the federal government.
Absolutely. And one other recent example I would point out, and I just saw this on my timeline and I retweeted it this morning, was I'm someone that goes kind of all the way back to the origins of crypto. And back in those days, it was so, I mean, you had to have hours and hours of crazy conversation with somebody just to convince them. The energy cost of convincing one person that crypto might be a viable technology was astronomical, and only the most really kind of crazy guys would undertake that effort, right? So what I saw this morning is, of course, this year we saw the launch of the BlackRock ETFs. We've seen the integration of these things into a lot more mainstream platforms. Even Jamie Dimon is saying, well, I'm not a huge crypto fan, but our company, like, our business model now rests on various blockchain technologies, right? Big banks are now using smart contracts in a way that, 10 years ago they were making fun of it, and now they're using it. And so the clip I saw this morning that I posted to my timeline was, there's a BlackRock asset manager who's responsible for about 10 trillion in global assets. And he pulled out a chart and he said, right now, digital asset adoption is outpacing any other technology adoption we have seen in our lifetimes, including the internet and mobile phones.
Holy crap.
And he pulled out, and it's just like, even the big guys are going, this is coming, and we can't stop it. And I think there was a shift. And I talked to Mark Yusko, is a very good friend of mine that talks in this space. And he, for a while, he was talking about, the old Gandhi quote: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And it's kind of been that progression over the last, couple decade or so, of seeing now the big institutions, they've shifted from, we want to shut down and get rid of this, to how can we capture as much of it as possible, right? So even the big institutions are having to shift their business model. So I think it's really fascinating.
That's something that I, when I first started digging into the Bitcoin world, and I'm technically kind of a retard. I just sort of, when people explain it, I understand it, but there's no way I could re-explain it to someone else. But I kind of like get it intuitively. And one thing that became pretty clear to me after a couple of years of scratching the surface of it was, if this is everything that people think it could be or want it to be, then it's inevitable that the major institutions are going to take it over. And so, like, that is the process by which it achieves everything that people want it to achieve. It's kind of like a Trojan horse, in a sense, that it becomes such a force of nature that they're forced to take it on. And in being forced to change it on, it's such being forced to take it on, it's such a fundamental change that they're obligated to change their behavior, to change their structure of doing things, and the way that they the way they manage their assets and the types of technologies they take advantage of. Like, they have to take it on. And in them taking it on, that's what normalizes and mainstreams it for us to use for our purposes as well.
Sure. And to that end, Bitcoin and crypto kind of is a mini Hanseatic League, right? Because it's everywhere. People are telling their friends about it, getting their friends to do it. I mean, even when the whole NFT craze, happened with people getting the Bored Apes and the profile pictures, and it all of that is really kind of silly on a surface level. But on a not so surface level, it's creating these very low. I think this is a key to any movement, Hanseatic or otherwise, deliberate or undeliberate, is having these low cost opportunities for somebody that knows nothing about it to engage in some low-level participation and then work their way up to more participation, right? Because the less you ask of somebody up front, the less of a tough sell it is. And another factor about this, you could sort of think of crypto and the Hanseatic League, looking at the like the map, right? You could think of it, the approach of taking over all these 12 countries that the league encompassed. You could almost think of it like the survival strategy of the league is almost like that of being a cancer, right? Think of each one of these states and nations and kingdoms as being like an organism, right? And if the decentralized coalition infests enough of the critical organs of the state, then they dare not pick up the scalpel and try to carve it out for fear they will hit something, a key artery, a key vein that will do more damage to them than what they're trying to remove. Right?
It's almost like you're saying life finds a way.
Yes. It really, it's kind of a weird way of thinking of it, but it really does. And in the case of some of these big banking executives and big finance, I know guys that are very much in TradFi. I know guys that are very much into crypto. And a lot of them say, even Trump said, I really didn't know anything about crypto. And then all my sons started talking about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's been a road for many politicians that knew not. They're like, all of a sudden my kids are into this thing. My kids are buying profile pictures and NFTs. And what are these people going to do? Are they going to declare monkey pictures illegal and arrest their own children? It just
it's funny you talk about having these sorts of low friction, really low barrier to entry sort of ways for people to begin. You could think of it as like for people to begin LARPing your lifestyle, the lifestyle you want them to have. And this is actually accomplished better in like the end of the height of the tech and software and entrepreneur industry. Like online businesses have been doing this for a long time. Offline businesses are doing this too, like loss leaders. That's the premise behind a loss leader, is that you're going to give someone something that's really easy to say yes to, because once someone says that first yes, it's easy for them to say the next yes and the next yes. Mm-hmm. One of the best people for this is Alex Hormozi. He's built multiple businesses entirely off the premise of give the people, your target demographic, give them everything for free. Give them everything you possibly can for free. Solve their problems for free, because once you've solved their problems for free, then it's much easier to ask them to pay for, because what you're doing is you solve one problem, which reveals the next problem. And once you've solved that problem for free, then they realize they have this other problem, and now they're willing to pay to have that problem solved, and you're the one who just gave them something for free, so they're willing to give it to you. They're willing to pay you to solve that problem. You've demonstrated your worth to them. Sure. This is like the fundamental. I think there's a lot of people, a lot of the theory cells in our little neck of the internet, kind of look down on like entrepreneur Twitter and like entrepreneurial guys and the business guys who aren't like, they're kind of politically normie. They're not super plugged in and red pilled like everyone, but they're effective. They know how to build things, and sure. that's a lot of the world that is onboarding into the MAGA world, the whole Silicon Valley. Tech founder, startup, venture capitalist, investor, like this is their entire world. Their entire world is, how do I build something and then get it in the hands of as many people as possible and monetize that process? So there's so much that we can learn from them, and having them come into this world opens up so much potential and opportunity for us.
Sure, and this is a very old approach. We touched last time, and we won't go too much back into it, but we touched a little bit into Japanese history, and something I think the West could very much learn from them is they have a kind of there are actually three major religions in Japan. There's Buddhism, there's Christianity has a good grasp over there, and then there's Shintoism. And of those three, it's kind of weird because Westerners tend to think of religion or belief systems as being a very exclusive thing. Most Westerners would say, I am either a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, right?
Right.
But in Japan, they don't view belief systems as being entirely exclusive to one another. So there are many Japanese people that might identify themselves as a Buddhist, but they will get married in a Christian wedding ceremony. They will celebrate Christmas, and they will do a lot of the modern things associated with that. But then they will also do things like Shinto is really almost, it's weird because they will call it not a religion, because it really isn't to them, even though it sort of follows the forms. It's really kind of a low-level folk, and it kind of is a weaving together of history, a little bit of spirituality, but it also is something it's a very low-dose thing, right? In Japan, many Japanese people who work in a high-rise office building will go down the elevator, they'll walk down the street to a small little shrine, and they'll throw a 5 yen coin into a shrine and simply say a small prayer, and it's nothing more than, I hope I have a good day, right? And it's incredible because it's like a way of, it's that low-cost engagement, right? In the West, so much of what people think of as spiritual is let's try to get people in a high engagement, or get people to make a big commitment of several hours to come talk about something. But I think there is the structure of that approach is, let's find these low cost ways for people to participate in something larger than themselves, right? And we talked about some of the shrines they have over there have been there for like the ones I went to on Enoshima have been there for 1,500 years. And it's so woven into their daily life, and it really provides this kind of, it's like this inoculation against cancel culture, because they have this constant stream of daily little doses of preserving culture and spirituality. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It's something really that like focuses and sustains and preserves the most powerful asset in the world, which is human attention.
Sure.
It's like a tradition, which I've said before. That tradition is transgenerationally encoded collective memory, and each generation solves a problem or figures out a network of ways to solve a collection of problems, and then as those generations pass away, if you don't continue to move in the way that they do and interact with the world the way that they do, you begin to lose the memory of how those problems were solved, which means they're going to crop right back up again.
Sure. And in most people in daily life in Japan, they spend hundreds of small opportunities engaging with and sustaining those types of cultural forms. It's really quite beautiful. It's something that, if you've never been to Japan or experienced it, it's something that's very odd to outsiders, but eventually you really see there's a very deep kind of beauty to it.
I want to highlight something real quick here that Screwed Up Rebellion said about Pete's recent episode with Stormy Waters on the robber barons. He says it's so flames emojis, and I agree. It is. That one really rearranged my noggin. I had a whole bunch of stuff just completely clicked into place. I'm going to probably have more thoughts on it here in the near future. I've got like 24 hours of driving over the next 2 days. So I'm hoping that some stuff percolates to the surface. But the American history is not what you've been taught to believe. There are so many things. Every day I think, okay, I finally weeded out all of the I don't know, the conspiracy theories, the lib conspiracy theories that they've embedded into my brain that I've accepted as standard history. There's so much history that we don't know about, and there's such a deep, rich tradition of genuine American history and business greatness. One of the things that stuck out to me that Stormy was talking about was Henry Ford. And the newspaper, and forgive me, I forgot the name of it, Dearborn something or other. But it was his newspaper that he started, and if I understood the story correctly, even if this isn't actually the exact details of it, the idea of this is someone has absolutely done this, and it's absolutely brilliant. As he was cranking out these cars off of the production line, he had an issue of his newspaper in the car. So everyone got this newspaper, and it was subscription based. So then if they wanted to keep getting that newspaper, then they would subscribe, and it generated an entirely new vertical that was getting people thinking like Henry Ford. The way that people like Henry Ford think, like producing it out to the masses, giving them a product that's revolutionary and absolutely transforms their lives in so many great ways, and then including for free this little token of something that they feel inclined to, they got it for free, now they're inclined to pay for it, and all the more so back then when, now getting a free newspaper would be like, why'd they put this trash in my car? So you got to you got to update your operating system for the modern age. But that sort of the word that comes to mind is propaganda, but it's not even that. It's something more than propaganda. Delivering a product to someone, and then that's fundamental, that changes their lives, and including with it something that clues them into the way you think about the world, and then offering them a chance to opt into that and continue to be enculturated into your worldview. Like that's just brilliant.
And to kind of, but the meta value of that is sharing that with others. Right.
Yes.
You're creating a flow that leads into a shared experience. Right. Let me give you one very cool example of that in Japanese culture that I think people will identify with. So when I visited, I told you I visited the tomb of and the shrines of two very important men. One was the founder of the Tokugawa shogunate, whose family ruled Japan for 15 generations. And the other one was Emperor Meiji, whose family took back over Japan in the 1860s and really set them up for the Japanese empire that lasted through World War II, right? Two very critical reformers who ended an age of their country's history and kind of ushered in a new age. So something I noticed while I was there was that these places they're historical places because they are celebrating a historical figure, but there's historical artifacts. Like they had the documents that when the emperor back in the 1600s declared Tokugawa Ieyasu is the shogun of Japan, those documents are there. So it's both a piece of history, but also a piece of kind of spirituality, art. It's all kind of woven in. They don't separate these things, right? It's a museum. It's like if we combined a museum with a church, with an artistic experience, right? And by weaving those things together. So one thing that was there is at both of those places, these sake breweries from all over Japan send their barrels of their sake to those places to consecrate it in the spirit of that. So let me translate this to what the American equivalent would be. Imagine if a company like Jack Daniels said, okay, you know what? We're here to make Jack Daniels, and we want to make an awesome drink that Americans enjoy, but we don't just want to make a drink and sell it. So for the last 4 weeks of the distilling and aging process of Jack Daniels whiskey, we take every barrel out and stack it up next to the grave of Thomas Jefferson and consecrate the whiskey with a little of the spirit of old man Jefferson himself, right? And so every time an American takes a drink of Jack Daniels, you're kind of like, yeah, that is, and it's got the old Jefferson spirit in it, right?
Right.
But imagine if a different whiskey company said, you know what we do? We're unique. We're not like those guys. We take our whiskey and for our last few weeks of our aging process, we put it in a covered wagon and we run it up and down the dusty trails in Wyoming where Buffalo Bill himself used to, right? And what if the appeal of drinking or consuming that brand wasn't just this shallow consumerism? What if there was actually kind of a historic and semi-spiritual ritual worked in with this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, you're making my brain explode with ideas.
See, and I think that this is something, and Emperor Meiji himself recognized his country had come to the end of its medieval era, and he said, we have to learn from other countries and modernize ourselves, and we need to borrow some effective things from other cultures, but make them our own, right? And I think that America may have reached a point where we might benefit from this. Things like the Hanseatic League, right? This approach to low cost buy-in, the kind of persistent latent spirituality. I think that's something that people honestly very much identify with. Hold on, what's that? It would be great if Jack Daniels said publicly they'll no longer sponsor Troon pedo events for kids. That'd be a nice. Well, exactly, right? Okay, so that transitions into a very important point, and thank you, Kate. That's a very good point. So we were kind of talking about, we were saying Elon, his role and his companies is kind of like a Hanseatic League, but wokeness itself, the woke mind virus, this example of cancel culture. So people say, well, I mean, how do we know this can work? Well, it already is working. Wokeness is a Hanseatic League. And it operates through their persistent little cultural injections. It operates through their hijacking of institutions and social processes and bending them in their direction. It operates through exactly what she's pointing out is, every time you turn around, wokeness is injecting itself into another product or another brand or another beloved movie franchise, right? They're taking over the culture, or have been, right? There's now some pushback, but they've been taking over the culture using this approach. Right?
It's like every time you drink a Bud Light that has a rainbow flag on it, you're getting a little bit of that essence of, instead of the essence of Thomas Jefferson or whatever, you're getting the essence of the rainbow.
They are trying to force you to consume and embrace their nonsense willingly or against your will, or if people just finally roll their eyes and give into it and go, it's hopeless, it's everywhere, it can never be gotten rid of. And it is kind of a demoralization ritual. So here's what I think is, so let's just kind of flesh out this approach though. So wokeness as a Hanseatic League, just like we talked about, the league didn't have a standing governing body. It didn't have a treasury. It didn't have a central location. And yet, and like a lot of things, it evolved in more than one place, right? And I think you're right there. We need moralization rituals. And so wokeness, it coalesced, I think, from a few different factors. I think university, a lot of these ideas, the kind of the Marxist philosophy, some of the grievance studies, it coalesced around some of these things. But I think the internet played a role in that you had this explosion on particularly 13-year-olds on Tumblr who got unsupervised, access to websites like Tumblr at a time when their parents didn't really understand what they were being exposed to. And they kind of got their brains hijacked with making up gender pronouns and creating a whole in-group structure around it, right? And fast forward to about 10 years later, all these people are working in HR departments, and they're making you take sensitivity training, and they're making you put your pronouns in your bio or be looked down upon. And they're just like that cancerous approach of infesting the organs of the institution, right? That's what they're doing. And it's interesting because they're doing a lot of this without a whole lot of central direction. It's actually pretty effective for a mindless approach. Although I do think there are a few cunning sociopaths. Yeah, exactly. This FEMA video, right? We see, and this is such a key example, because not only does it show how thoroughly they've infested these institutions that used to be functional, but this is just such a sad thing to look at, because that there are people in North Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and Florida who literally died in their homes waiting for help because these people diverted resources to all of the ridiculous woke things that these people have decided have to be prioritized, right?
Disaster equity,
right? And so what you're looking at there, that is your woke Hanseatic League. And so So here's some of the, and I'm going to use this word very carefully. So you have to, in order to in Starship Troopers, they say, well, to defeat the bug, we must understand the bug, right? What is it about their approach that is effective? And I think the answer is, first of all, membership in the woke cult is very informal, right? Nobody ever walks up to you and hands you a membership form and says, here's the 30-page contract to join the woke Hanseatic League, right? Nobody walks up to you. There's no membership card. There's no official. In fact, most people don't even know that they've joined the woke cult until they're kind of trying to escape from it and realize, what have I stumbled into? I have so many former lefty and center lefty, and even some very far left friends who were like, they just went to school and they thought all this was about sensitivity. And then one day I had a friend who one day a bunch of them ganged up on her, one of her Jewish friends, and called her an oppressor and a colonizer. And this person doesn't have a whole lot of ties to any of that, right? And a lot of people don't realize it until a friend or somebody they know or care about suddenly gets cancel cultured by the woke mob, and they suddenly are like, wow, I thought I bought into this nice thing, and it really is this. It's kind of a moment of horror. So most people don't realize they're a member of the woke cult until they're in it. So they offer the fringe benefit is that anyone who joins the woke mob receives a social boost, right? Oh, I put up the latest, right? I subscribed to the latest current thing, and I get this boost of social cohesion with everybody else who did the current thing, right?
I did the Black Lives Matter black profile picture.
There you go, right? And you got a little bit of boost for doing that. And it starts out as you'll get a little boost for joining, but then it eventually becomes kind of a protection racket. At first, it's you're one of the group if you join and change your profile picture. But fast forward a couple down the years down the road, it's you will be canceled if you don't add that to your profile picture. So, and like I said, even it's effective enough such that even people who don't like or want to join the woke mob will sometimes do so for the fringe benefit. You can look at some high profile examples like Ethan Klein, right? He was a YouTuber. He was a big into the skeptic, and he criticized wokeness. But then one day, I think he just had this sort of sellout moment of realizing that some of his audience was woke and they were nagging him, and he saw that YouTube was canceling people on the platform and giving people strikes and giving people more lenient treatment on the platform and demonetization. And I think this is a case of a guy, and don't get me wrong, I'm not praising Ethan Klein because I don't like him, and I think he deserves everything bad that's happened to him as a result. But here's a guy that didn't join it because he was a true believer. He simply joined for the fringe benefits of, I get this boost and I get to be part of the protection racket, right? And I think that's an example. Another one is there was a recent thing on 4chan. People were talking about transmaxing, and someone made an actual intellectual argument. They're like, as a white guy, maybe I should just go to work and pretend to be trans because look at all the benefits I get, right? I get priority hiring. Nobody will ever fire me. All of this, no one will ever call me out on my incompetence. It's weird that wokeness has created such a pervasive benefit structure that even people who hate it will consider joining, right?
Yeah, it's like, I'm trying to think of how, because it's obviously it's changing now. Like it's becoming uncool to be woke. Like now, publicly asserting woke doctrine has a negative social benefit to you. And I think I'm just kind of pondering this in real time, but it's like their enforcement mechanism when it shifted from positive to negative, like from you get these benefits for being a part of the club to you get this pain for not being part of the club. That generated
Absolutely.
a positive feedback loop where their enforcement mechanism actually became their undoing, because when they tried to enforce membership in the group, they actually diminished desired membership in the group.
Absolutely. And you basically just said my next point before I even said it. And that's that. So go back to the original Hanseatic League was a sensible approach. Let's filter for skilled and valuable people who can be part of a skilled and value producing network, and eventually produce enough network value from this coalition that even kings will pause at the idea of screwing with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ultimate goal is, sure, if you're the king of Denmark, you could be upset at the league and the members and their behavior, and you could grab your guards and go down to the docks and grab the nearest dock worker and say, punish this man, throw him in jail or whatever. But then there's this blowback effect of okay, Your Majesty, you got one dock worker worth of asserting your power, but you're about to suffer millions of dock workers and ship captains worth of economic retribution. And even kings cannot withstand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a very similar sense, wokeness has sort of bent even powerful people, right? I think there are a lot of powerful people, and we could probably debate this one. This could be a whole podcast. Mark Cuban, right? Everyone's like, oh, what the heck happened to that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it may, of course, they could have some kind of blackmail on people who said that, but it could simply be this is a man who's made a calculated decision that the benefits of siding with wokeness exceed the drawbacks of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a powerful enough Hanseatic network can even bend very powerful people into its philosophy who don't even want to. So
the implications for what seems to be happening now,
yes.
like there is, it seems that within this is probably just a feature of the human experience, that in the formation of every Hanseatic League is the seed for the formation of a competing Hanseatic League. Like
Sure.
the Hanseatic League proper was, I don't even need to know the specific details of the history to be able to connect some dots here and see what types of people did not like the existence of the Hanseatic League and its ability to bend the knee of kings and allow people to maintain sovereignty over their land. People who don't have their own land would tend to resent such a thing, and went to extraordinary great lengths across centuries to develop the countervailing power structures to undermine that, and then began exporting that technology across all different corners of the globe. And we're still deep in the throes of that today. So it's like there is no like creation of the perfect, Hanseatic League to end all Hanseatic Leagues that will where you solve every single problem. There's got to be some measure of humility, recognizing that you need wisdom in the little day-to-day decisions and stuff, where you're able to enforce your will, but also not enforce it so irrationally or unjustly that you promote the countervailing response.
Sure. And actually, I think the best, let me just send you this post, because I think this one really kind of absolutely slams home this point. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll send you this post. You can put it up on the screen. There, that one.
Okay, opening it here. Twitter is so slow. The woke perimeter. Okay, here it comes. The woke perimeter is real.
So this is, in essence, at first, Wokeness was this loose, oh, everybody get in and you have the benefit layer. But then they devolved into the threatening anybody outside of it. They devolved to that point, and now it's to where if you're a left-wing authoritarian, you're a quote good person. If you're slightly questioning one or two of their actions or policies, they will call you alt-right basically as a threat of expulsion, and then they will just outright call everybody else a Nazi, right? And so kind of capping off this point is wokeness was a very quick to emerge kind of Hanseatic League, right? But its downfall is, like you said, and of course they got into cancel culturing their enemies, right? But the problem with that is that they're the left and they are very bad at figuring out what sensible boundaries are on anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they took in the short term, it was a brilliant approach. Like if it was 2010 and you had to invest in, if the woke mind virus was a stock and you had to buy a 7 or 8 year bond on it, right? In 2010, that would have been a good investment. But if you bought a 30-year bond on it, that would probably be a disastrous investment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an incredibly short-sighted approach. It has a lot of blowback, and they don't know when to quit.
It's interesting to draw a lesson from the Bible here. You said something you said there kind of piqued my interest. You said part of the methodology of their particular league involves the cancellation of their enemies. But
right?
What would happen if you created a league that included the methodology, the token that you participate in that league is loving your enemies?
Sure.
I don't even know what that would look like necessarily. I suppose we have a few thousand years of tradition to help us with that.
Absolutely, and I think in the long run that approach tends to prevail. But I guess at least in the short term, you have the risk of what if the cancel culture people take over all of the social institutions and convince enough people that everybody outside of it is a Nazi, and so there's the short-term risk of you risk them taking over the institutions and potentially doing some very awful and destructive things before they're finally brought down. Right.
And that's why the proper definition of loving your enemies involves sometimes punishing them, executing justice on their behalf, because like the thing with canceling people, it's not that canceling people is bad per se, it's that canceling people for bad, stupid reasons is bad. Canceling someone who does something worthy of cancellation is absolutely appropriate. Roy Cooper ought to be canceled. Kamala Harris ought to be canceled. These types of people ought to be canceled, and canceling them is not bad. It's not going to be counterproductive because they are so bad, they're so evil, they're so destructive that there's far more people in the world who will implicitly, intuitively recognize the justice of their cancellation than there are people who will be outraged by it. The people who are outraged by it are, they're freaking honey badgers. But if you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, then by definition, you are aligning yourself with reality, which is going to give you a lot more staying power than those who are at war with it.
Sure. And one of those, we've talked about it abundantly, is the competency crisis. One of the blowback consequences of wokeness, the Hanseatic wokeness, is that they have driven all of the competence. And I've talked to friends in a multitude of industries right now who tell me that I'm hearing from companies and institutions that have lost their best programmers, that have lost their most talented people with core knowledge of legacy systems. And it's all because somebody didn't use somebody's gender pronouns. That person got canceled. And you now have organizations that are infested with this that are making these incredibly short-sighted decisions. That is removing competence from, we're not only hijacking institutions, but we're removing support structures like competence, right? And so we're all potentially going to pay the cost of this. So here's a couple more thoughts on this. So how did wokeness succeed? Well, again, they capitalized on those low cost opportunities to join that don't even look like opportunities to join, right? I mean, everybody now goes to work, and we all get go do the sensitivity training, and put the gender pronouns in the bio, and say do the climate change training, right? These are all these low cost, pervasive membership opportunities to suck people into their approach and their views, but none of them involves walking up to you with a membership card and a membership form, right? So I think that's a key, is to find ways to get people's existing interests and what people already think and believe to lead into being more involved in a positive movement, if that makes sense.
Yes. Screwed Up Rebellion says a libertarian told me that there's never been a right-wing government in the history of the world, but he's a constitutionalist. The thought that I had for that was that there's no such thing as a left-wing government. Left-wing political movements are definitionally anti-government. And
well, sure.
What we're describing here is really like what it looks like to create a government. We have a Nuremberg regime that has essentially outlawed the existence of government steadily over the past 80 or so years, with wokeness really being kind of the apotheosis of that undertaking. And what's before us now is the need to create a government, to have an institution that is to take an institution and populate it with incompetent people who disable that institution's ability to function is indistinguishable from just simply destroying the institution. It's just like a mechanism, probably the mechanism for destroying the institution. So just because there's people who have titles who do a job under that title doesn't mean that that institution really actually functionally exists. So they're evolving themselves out of existence by their own trajectory. It's not really a matter of having to go to war with them as much as it is just allowing them to extinguish themselves and protecting us and our people from that from that extinction burst as best as possible.
Sure. And I think, like a lot of trends, people, and this is something I will say I think there's benefits to left ordered and right ordered thinking. And I think what you find throughout history is that lefties or left-leaning people are often first to hit upon a new trend. But because their thinking lacks boundaries and because they are too open and chaotic in their thinking, they often have a hard time anticipating or dealing with the second, third, and fourth order consequences of the thing that they embrace. Right?
Right.
So I think the woke mind virus is they were first to the trend of let's create a decentralized network with low cost buy-in that will advance political interests in a direction we want it to go. But they were so short-sighted in that approach that they threatened to kind of collapse everything potentially, right? By being so unbounded in it. So left-leaning thinking is often good at pushing society in new directions. But right thinking is usually better at tempering it to preserve stability.
Yeah, at incorporating those new directions and ensuring that it's actually that if you're trying to reach for something that's really high up, it's not of much use to you to like completely detach your arm from yourself and throw it up to the thing. Like, that's not you reaching for it. You need to, your whole body needs to go with it. So it's good to have that openness, which is I think the divide I think we see most strikingly here between left and right is actually a proxy really for masculine and feminine. And
it is.
The woke thing is the massively overcharged feminine instinct that's being subverted into destruction, the elimination of borders, because women want to have they maintain the inner workings of a thing, so they want to know what's in every little corner of the thing, their domain that they have to protect. They don't want to have a spider off in the corner, or a rat underneath the floorboards, or they want to know where absolutely everything is. So they're going to destroy every border functionally, so they have an awareness of everything within them. And then the masculine responsibility is to maintain those borders, maintain the structures, the definition. Like the wokeness has gone so far as to even trying to destroy the borders between concepts. Like this is what like gender bending stuff is. They're going to war even with abstract borders.
Sure.
And so then the masculine responsibility is to enforce and establish and maintain those borders. And when the borders need to move, the masculine spirit has to be at the forefront of that, allowing it to be like it has to be pushed by the feminine. And this is like the woman who tells the man, go solve this problem, go take care of it. Oh, okay, I'll go do it. That's the proper relationship between them.
Yes, and left thinking is often better at diagnosing a problem or suggesting a new direction, and right thinking is usually better at engaging in that tempered and thoughtful problem solving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the issue is we had a whole generation of boomers who were very, very stuck in the ordered thinking of the 1950s, right? And they kind of operate on this assumption that all that would just presume and that everything would just stop at some reasonable point, because they lived in a fairly ordered and bounded world. And every day I hear people who go, it's like I call it, it's like they're waiting for the automatic magical societal correction mechanism to kick back in and fix, like, surely the next thing that woke people do will be the thing that's crazy enough to kick everybody back into sanity and fix it, right? But that process is not automatic. It has to be, I mean, we're literally in an unprecedented situation here, right?
Right.
In all of human history. But I think a couple of things I think are very, and I think a lot of it metastasizes in the, a lot of it kind of metastasizes in the proliferation, like Samuel Francis writes, of bureaucracy, right? And we look at all of this, so much bureaucracy has taken over society to the point where it almost seems like it's unfixable, right? Let me give you a really down to earth and kind of maybe a little bit scary example. So I had a family member who actually worked at U.S. Stratcom. If you don't know what that is, that's the major command where they're in charge of all of the nuclear weapons, right? Submarines, land-based, air-based, and they map the geostrategic situation. They monitor what adversaries are doing. So this, he was involved in they recently completed a new building. And you can look this up, and it was the building cost them like $1.3 billion. And it took, now mind you, the original facility was constructed in 1957, and it was built in like 5 months, right? And the approval, I mean, it was like from draft to construction was like, it was just a few months. But the existing facility, it was like a 5 or 6 year approval process, right? And then it was another 7 years of construction and holdbacks. And the final cost of the building was $1.3 billion, which if you just compare it in raw dollars, it's like 100 times the cost of a comparable building. But actually, if you adjust for inflation, which is very important, if you adjust for inflation, the new building came out to about 30x the cost of what the original facility, and we're not just talking that's just the dollar cost, but the time cost was again like a 15 to 18x time cost to build something. And you would think, wait a second, we live in a modern world. Look at all this construction technology. Look at computer-aided drafting. I mean, sure, some buildings have some new things like network cabling that they didn't have at the time, but it really doesn't make sense or add up that we wouldn't. Why have we arrived at a point where we can build 30 of the old building for the cost of one of the new ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, nowadays, this is like one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it. 90% of the cost of everything now is the bureaucracy.
Right.
It's all of the approvers. It's 16 committees have to design, approve, and then an appropriations committee, and then somebody has to review it for the environmental factors and the climate change factors, and you have all these bureaucrats whose job depends on them finding one little thing wrong with what you're trying to do, and then insisting we have to go all the way back to the drawing board to fix it. Right?
This is what Elon's going through in like multiple different companies right now.
Exactly. And so it's like, and I think that if we want the wokeness, the core approach of the wokeness Hanseatic is that they are constantly trying to increase bureaucracy and nonsense that they are the approvers for, right? And the opposite approach is to find ways to break down bureaucracy or to go around bureaucracy. I thought it was a tremendous white pill watching how many awesome, even some guys in the group chat we're part of, mobilize for these hurricanes and say, you know what? Screw the bureaucracy. I'm going to go out there with some guys, with some supplies. We're gonna form our own little proto Hanseatic group here, and we're gonna go help, right? And at the end of the day, that is the transition in thinking that's going to have to happen for us to turn society around. Is we're going to have to make bureaucracy so uncool that bureaucracy has to be attacked as effectively as wokeness attacks people who won't use their gender pronouns.
I wrote here because I would have forgotten it if I didn't write it down as soon as it came to me. I said, there's nothing riskier than a world in which you aren't allowed to take risks, towards which every bureaucracy inevitably tends. Because all the bureaucracy, the premise of it, the ostensible reason for it is risk avoidance, harm reduction, et cetera, et cetera. And you could see examples of this, like there's like such a great banality of the evil in bureaucracy. Like what's happening right now on these different airstrips and the different communities where they're trying to get all these different rescue flights and everything. You've seen the officials, the formal officials, whether local or federal, they've been standing down people's flights, and ostensibly, and I'm sure many of them actually believe this, the reason they're doing it is because, well, if we have all these planes and helicopters coming in and out all over the place, and there's no order to it, then it's too risky. We're going to have planes colliding, and there'll be even more disaster. But this is like an inability to see the bigger picture, and it's kind of like the analogy I used a minute ago. I'll kind of torture it a little more, where you're like pulling your arm off to throw it up to reach something. The bureaucracy is kind of like, you got this thing you urgently need to reach. The bureaucracy says, you might just say the easy solution here is, well, let's just build a ladder. But you're going to build a ladder, the bureaucracy is going to have to come in, and they're going to have to verify the materials that the ladder was made in, the construction. They have to look over the blueprints. They're going to have to verify the licenses of all the people who constructed the ladder. They're going to have to go through all these things. And in the meantime, you can't use a ladder.
Did you employ enough trans people in the construction of the ladder?
Right. Once you start stacking those up, they just get more and more absurd, to the point where it's like, whatever this thing is we're trying to reach, we urgently need it. And if we can't get it, then number one, there's like, what option are you going to get? People are going to yank their arms off and throw them up to get it. Well, that doesn't work. People are going to try to climb higher than it and jump down to it, so they're going to get even more harmed. And you got the harm of people not having this urgent thing that they need. So in the name of risk reduction or risk prevention and harm reduction and everything, it's actually a much, much greater risk. Mm-hmm. And risk taking is really something defined within the masculine spirit, the actual healthy taking of risk. When you have the feminine spirit stepping outside of its bounds and trying to take over the risk management aspect of the project, then it's going to inevitably be done poorly, because it's not operating within the defined constraints of the masculine, right-wing, ordered, expanded perspective view.
Absolutely. And I think that's very key. I think something that if anybody here has not watched, I would highly recommend. It's one of my favorite series of all time. There's an HBO miniseries about Chernobyl, and if you watch that, it's the late Soviet Union, and it really you aside from being a historical piece, you can watch it as an analysis of just what happens when insane bureaucracy gets to the point of self-destruction. And these guys are, for anybody that hasn't watched it, it covers the Chernobyl accident, which happened because they were trying to do a safety test that had been bureaucratically delayed, and they were putting political pressure on the guy that was in charge to get it done on time because they all wanted to tick off their bureaucratic check boxes. And he was so afraid that he would fail this yet again that he pushed these guys to the safety limits. Meanwhile, the reactor itself had unsafe design features that had been put there because of cost cutting and had been hidden by a vast Soviet bureaucracy that wanted to protect the state, right? The KGB covered this up because, well, we have to protect the state secrets. We can't let the government look incompetent. Sound familiar, right? And the late Soviet Union, I think we are kind of almost speed running the end of the Soviet Union right now. There's just an astounding number of parallels. We could do a whole talk on that. And in the late Soviet Union, everything had become this mind-numbing. It was, in the case of Chernobyl, it was to the point where they had an exploded nuclear reactor. And there was more effort among the bureaucracy to hide what had happened, to pretend it wasn't bad. Everybody was more concerned about the politics and preserving their jobs than actually dealing with the reactor. And the guys, in the case of Legasov and Sherbina, who went there, they actually had to fight against this bureaucracy to save lives. Right? It's just an incredible human story. And it was so, and in a lot of ways, our bureaucracy has become that toxic, right? And that's why they hate guys like Trump and Elon, because these are guys that are trying to get rid of that toxic approach, right? And I think this is a very important point, because we kind of get back to, we've talked about the woke mind virus and the wokeness. And this is something that I struggled with a little bit to really fully understand, and we all probably 10 times a day, we go, oh my God, I can't understand these bureaucrats that are trying to prevent aid in North Carolina. I can't understand these people that are trying to shut Elon Musk down. I can't understand who would want to shut down Starlink, who would want to divert money from a Starlink or a rural internet program that works to something that we know doesn't work. Who would want to divert money to a $9 billion California rail project that doesn't work? Who would want to create more homelessness? Who would collapse California and then think we need more of that approach? So I think this is a very important insight that I think cannot be overstressed enough. I think there is kind of a hidden threat here, if you will. And so we talk about getting rid of bureaucracy, embracing a new, more sensible approach. Well, what is it that we're up against? Now, of course, there are powerful people in the power structures of the West who are not stupid. They are just sociopathic. Right? They are doing things that are deliberately undermining to freedom because they see the personal benefit. But there's a different kind of person. So I remember, what if Alt Hist? He had one of his videos. He talked about he called it the anthropology of NPCs, and in it he talked about how we have the NPC meme, right? Here's this person that just does the current thing. They don't question the government. They don't question anything. And of course, we think this is something new, but it's actually really kind of not. If you went back to the Middle Ages, your commoner, your common people kind of did the same thing. Oh, well, if the king says this is true, then I'll just do it, right? There were all kinds of ridiculous things that people believed and bought into because somebody in power or somebody with influence said so. And so it kind of comes down to, there are people who take a low risk, NPCs are people who take a low risk, low reward approach to life. They don't want to challenge anything because they don't want the risk of doing so, right? And so he talks about how in most societies in Europe, you had about a 70%, 30% ratio of people who are low risk, low reward people, or the NPC archetype, if you will, versus people who actually want to take risks and build great things, right? This is in the medieval times, this played out to the difference between nobles and peasants, right? And your nobles are people who are more taking a high risk, high reward approach to life. Think about this. In those days, I mean, sure, it's easy to say, oh, well, the noble lord has a higher social status and everything. But if one year there was a bad harvest and you couldn't pay the taxes on the land, who did the king show up, send his men, and behead? Not the peasant in the field. It was the lord who controlled it, right? So it's something we've almost kind of forgotten, that people of higher social status in those days had to take a riskier approach to life. Sure, you got to live in the castle, but you were actually responsible for something, right? So what I think happens if you talk about the Strauss-Howe intergenerational theory of, the fourth turning, weak men create hard times. And I think what happens is, in times of great abundance, we develop this caste of people who would normally be in the low risk, low reward persuasion, who are able to achieve the material success of a high risk, high reward person, simply because there's so much material abundance that they can kind of fake their way to it, if that makes sense. I made a post. In fact, I'll send you this one, because I think this, put this up on the screen, because I think this illustrates this type of person perfectly.
So you have the low risk, low reward type of person engaging in low risk behavior and getting high rewards. And so you want to have the high risk, high reward phenomenon, but intuitively something tells me that in order to overcome the low risk, low reward person engaging in low risk, high reward behavior, you have to have men willing to engage in high risk, low reward behavior.
Sure. To an extent, yes. So yeah, pull up that. I think this is perfect. It says every bureaucrat ever. So it says, how would you write, I changed a light bulb on your resume? Single-handedly managed the successful upgrade and deployment of new environmental illumination system with zero cost overruns and zero safety incidents, right?
That's so good.
And LinkedIn is absolutely chock full of people who make the most menial nonsense sound like some impressive feat, right? We have an entire class and caste of bureaucrats in society who obtain what really in any other time in history would not be a level of success available to them, right? If you were a peasant in medieval Europe, your only way of getting a castle and some land was to do something to really prove yourself, right? You had to get the king's notice, or marry into that family or something like that. But now we have this entire cast of low risk, high reward people who have taken over society with their skill set consists entirely of the most menial, inane tasks and making them sound impressive to other people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So this, if there is an enemy that has to be defeated, it is this. this is the enemy. And I think there was a post, and I struggled for a long time to really understand this mindset until one day I found someone criticizing a friend of mine. I'll just read this part of it. And I came to understand that there 2 seconds. That there really is a type of person that it's like they have come to believe that their mediocrity is a form of greatness, if you will. So, and I actually found this person articulated exactly what they think in their own words, which is very rare. We probably all know what a midwit is, right? It's somebody of a little bit above average intelligence who kind of, isn't really that smart, but they can learn all kinds of crazy buzzwords and things, but they're not smart. They can learn ideas, but they really are not smart enough to unlearn it, right?
They're smart enough to get themselves in trouble, but not smart enough to get themselves out.
Yep. And you run into these people a lot. So I found somebody that wrote a post and he called it the Midwit Manifesto. And I was like, wow, here's a very self-aware midwit who knows what he is. And he said, in fact, let me send you this one.
What I'm hearing here is that we need to go to war with the LinkedIn bros.
Kind of, yeah. All right, here, put this post up there.
And also that the woke right doesn't exist, but maybe it should.
Maybe it should.
Share screen.
Oh yeah, I see. Katie says this is exactly how business school. That's exactly what you're learning, right? So get a load of this. The Midwit Manifesto. The curse of existing in the middle part of the bell curve, at least in terms of trading and investing, is its utter inescapability. The fact that it is completely Sisyphean in nature. Ask a midwit to counter trade himself. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, it means if you're thinking about buying Tesla stock, right? If you're thinking about buying Tesla stock, before you buy it, make the case against buying Tesla stock, right? Or make the case for alternative investments you make, right? In other words, don't just convince yourself of the one point of view, attack it with several other points of view, and make sure you're really check your own bullshit. Right?
Imagine what it would have been like if you didn't have breakfast this morning.
Yep. So anyway, this guy says, ask a midwit to counter trade himself. He is unable to. He himself is a counter trade. He is doomed to make the wrong decision. He wants to go long, but decides to short in an attempt to counter trade himself. The counter trade becomes the trade. He fails again. The rock rolls back down the hill. Repeat and repeat ad infinitum. Personally, as someone who resides in the mid-curve nearly permanently, moments of brilliance are fleeting, impossible, while moments of left-curve brashness are also impossible. By the time a midwit considers aping, they are too late. In other words, they will buy the top and sell the bottom, right? The midwit wallows in his own mediocrity. He sullies his own decisions and the decisions of others. Do not share your opinion with one. Shortly, your good idea will become a mediocre one. He inevitably buys tops and sells bottoms. The stench of mediocrity is unwashable, so accept it, embrace it. Because ultimately, mediocrity is superior to the high IQ who fizzles out. But he's not countering that, sure, there's high IQ people who fizzle out, right? In fact, I know people who are the high risk, high reward types who, tried to make it in music or tried to start a company. And even some of them who are washed out and burned out, they say, I wouldn't change a thing because I'd rather have shot my shot and failed than spent my life wondering if I had a chance, right? So a lot of high risk, high reward people do in fact accept the possibility of failure and that they could, right? So, but in this case, he's saying, oh, well, I'm gonna soothe myself with the high IQ who burned out, when those people probably are okay with it. They knew what risk they were taking. So there's hundreds of examples of these men who flew far too close to the sun. I don't have to name them. Midwit's fate is ultimately one of happiness, one of contentment, the satisfaction of someone resigned to the winds of fate. Those who take a good man, a normal man, to a normal place, good place. So what I realized after reading this is that this was my missing piece. These people, there is a particular kind of mediocre person who wants to be great, like Elon Musk. They want to fly around in the private jet and have all the crazy stuff and have the accolades, and people say this is praise their accomplishments. But they can't, because to achieve great things, you have to take risks, and you have to be successful enough for your risk to pay off. If you're an investor, I mean, every great investor will tell you, well, I'm only have a 70 or 80% success rate, but it's good enough that my gains outweigh my losses, right? You have to evaluate investments on multiple axes and multiple points of view. You can't just follow a steps 1 through 7. You can't just follow a Dave Ramsey book and do it. And so these people, they try over and over again to achieve the success of an Elon Musk, and they become angry and resentful because they know they can't do it. I had a guy who asked me for investment advice once, and I would say, okay, well, I'm not going to take responsibility for your decisions, but I'm just going to kind of show you. I'll teach you the ropes. I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what I'm doing, and you can choose to copy me or not. And this guy did exactly what this guy's describing. Every time he couldn't execute a good decision when it was put in front of him. Every time a good decision was put in front of him, he'd counter-guess himself and make the dumb decision. And then he'd get very angry because he'd watch other people who made the good decision be successful while he failed. And the opposite. He would make a bad decision, say, what about this? I think that's a bad decision. He would go, oh no, I'm sure of myself, right? So this type of person, they shoot for greatness, they fail, they reluctantly return back to mediocrity, but they then take their ego and they rationalize their mediocrity as a form of greatness. Right? So this is the kind of bureaucrat that's sitting there on that FEMA video, right? This is the kind of bureaucrat that's tying up the process of building a government building and driving the cost of it up to 30x. This is the person sitting in your HR department firing your talented workers because they didn't take their sensitivity training or use somebody's gender pronouns. This is the person who is, these people that who absolutely suffer from Trump derangement syndrome and Elon derangement syndrome. They're incredibly angry because they watch a great or successful or high risk taking person achieve success that's not available to them. And they say, we've probably all seen the movie Office Space. The character Bill Lumbergh, right? Where he's like, did you fill out the TPS reports? Did you put the cover sheet on it, right? Some bureaucrat who is torturing the talented people in the office with his mediocre bureaucracy, right? And you have these people who they become very hateful and resentful that in their minds, their mediocrity is a form of greatness, but the rest of the world will not acknowledge it. And these are the people who buy into Wokism. These are the people, in Russia, the Bolsheviks were not a talented or smart group of people. They were a group of mediocre people who decided that their mediocrity was going to dominate.
And that's why they were so bloodthirsty and belligerent and destructive.
Yes. So, and intelligent people tend to think, oh, well, that person's a little bit dopey. Let's not think of them. So these people are actually a low-key threat because what they lack in intelligence, they make up for in weaponized stupidity. Right? Everybody's thinking, oh, well, all these people they're all a bunch of evil geniuses that are going to come out with their evil genius plan. Well, I actually think that's not the real threat. even though there are a few evil geniuses that steer this. I think the real threat is not the people who are going to try to outsmart you. It's the people who are going to try and outstupid you.
Oh, that's a banger.
and now that I've kind of outlined, you see what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
Western society collectively right now, we are not being outsmarted. We are being outstupided.
Oh, what does that say about the black pillars?
Yeah. And so, you know, I think I come from a family where my background is very much high risk, high reward types. And I have always been that type of person. And I've never looked down on, I always understand that, you know, some person's going to be, you know, the janitor in the building. Some person is going to do the more low key tasks. And I've always approached those people with a certain kindness, right? And what I learned in you know, I eventually this individual who I tried to help with investing eventually became very angry with me because I tried to help them. It didn't work out. And then they kept manifesting that as, you have obligations to help me and to make up for my mistakes and to take my risks for me and all of this, right? And I think that this type of person, even though it's our natural tendency to be kind to others, this is the one type of person that you cannot be kind to, because it will always backfire. And here's why. They will not take your kindness as an act of kindness and be grateful for it. They will take your kindness. They're walking around with this long list of grievances, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got this built up list of grievances. Somebody didn't use my gender pronouns. There's Elon zipping around in his jet. There's Trump saying something he can get away with and I can't get away with, right? They build up this long list of grievances, and the moment you do something kind for them, they look at your kind act as it's like a validation stamp on their long list of grievances. And they then look at that as, oh, well, that we won't take this as an act of kindness. We will take it as a down payment on the rest of what you owe me, right? That's the mentality that the true believers in wokeness, these people that sit there at their keyboards typing out deranged anti-Elon tweets all day, cheering for him to fail, even if it means the failure of Western society with it, right? They want to drag greatness down into mediocrity in order to validate their own egos.
Man, this has been the last conversation was fantastic, and I think this one's been even better. And I have a feeling that you've got even more where all of this has come from.
Oh, absolutely. I've got quite a bit. I developed a good list of notes, but this one was pretty. I'll just cap this off with this individual who got very angry at me for trying to help him and not being able to make up for his shortcomings. You know, he eventually told, oh, well, I want you to help me. He asked me to do unethical things in order to help him get ahead. And I just said, look, dude, I owed you nothing to begin with. And me trying to help you and you being unable to compensate for the good advice you were given with your own personal failures is just not something I'm going to invest further in. So this person tried to talk me into their worldview, and they ended up linking me this Tim Dillon clip. And they were like, this is what I think. And this is my idea of greatness. And I'm like, okay, I'll entertain, I'll bite, I'll watch. And it was this clip of Tim Dillon, the comedian, on Joe Rogan. I'm not a particularly big fan of his style of comedy, but I do occasionally he makes a funny observation or whatever. Anyways, this thing where he's talking and he says, it's all this. We all know it's a big evil empire, and yeah, they lied about the WMDs in Iraq, and they lied and sent kids to die in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they lied about this, and they lie about all the toxic stuff in the food, and they lie about all the scandal. And he's basically just saying, oh yeah, it's all a big lie, it's a big evil empire, might as well just own up to it. And then he kind of launches into this joke about, but we all get to drive through at McDonald's and eat a Big Mac. And doesn't that make it all worth it? Right? And I'm like, no, I really don't think that does. And I say that sincerely, as I have friends who died in Iraq. I have friends who died in Afghanistan. And my response to this person was, well, if you want to take that as I can appreciate the comedic value of sort of, yeah, it's all screwed. So if we're really just entertaining this as a joke, then okay, whatever. I don't. It's not my cup of tea. But I said, if you're really trying to sell me on this as a moral position and a serious outlook on the world, then I think that's pretty disgusting. I said, go buy your McDonald's Big Mac at the drive-thru, and then go drive to the house of somebody whose son died in Iraq and knock on their door and go tell them, that hey, eat the Big Mac in front of them and tell them that this makes it all worth it. Right? I said, you'd have to be the most inhuman, indefensible kind of person to really take that up as a serious moral position. And this person became very angry with me for pointing out the hypocrisy in their worldview. And that's when I realized that people like this really do exist. People who really will knowingly side with evil purely because it gives them and bestows them the opportunity to have their mediocrity elevated to being a form of greatness. And if there really is a mentality that the West will have to overcome and grapple with, that's what lies at the heart of all this.
We need to put the midwits back in a cage.
Yeah, well, and midwits have existed in every time and place. They simply haven't had this vast social and institutional apparatus for deluding themselves into greatness, right?
Right.
And in fact, I asked Grok this question. It was kind of funny because I'm like, what's a good way of explaining this? And I said, in fact, let me just link this to you and put this up there, because I think even Grok sort of recognizes this. This is actually pretty funny. Here, post that, and we'll put that up.
There it is. This is funny. Explain how a midwit could be offended that their mediocrity isn't treated as a form of greatness.
But it's really accurate, though.
A midwit is a term often used somewhat derogatively. I don't even think that's a word.
Derogatively, yep.
To describe someone who is of average intelligence or slightly above, but who overestimates their own intellectual capabilities. Here's how such a person might feel offended when their mediocrity isn't celebrated. 1. Overestimation of self. Midwits might have enough knowledge or intelligence to understand and engage with complex ideas, but lack the depth or creativity to contribute significantly or to see the limits of their understanding. This can lead them to believe they are more exceptional than they truly are. 2, the Dunning-Kruger effect. This cognitive bias leads people with moderate skill or knowledge to overestimate their ability because they lack the expertise to recognize their own limitations. When reality doesn't match their self-perception and their ideas or contributions are not hailed as brilliant, they might feel slighted or undervalued. 3, social media and echo chambers. Modern social platforms can create echo chambers where average ideas might receive undue praise from like-minded individuals, reinforcing the midwit's belief in their own exceptionalism. When they step outside these bubbles, the lack of similar affirmation can be jarring. Man, this is good grief. Participation trophy culture. If someone has grown up in an environment where merely participating gets rewarded, they might expect similar recognition in all areas of life. When their average work or ideas aren't celebrated as great, they might interpret this as unfair or offensive. Misunderstanding criticism. A midwit might view constructive criticism or the lack of praise as an attack or an oversight of their obvious talent. They might not see criticism as a chance to improve, but as a personal affront. This is all like the inverse of all these, or like this is like a list of all the things that if you want to know whether or not you're a midwit, just like this is like the personality test for midwittery.
Yeah.
Cultural emphasis on exceptionalism. There's a cultural narrative, especially in places like the US, that anyone can be great or exceptional. When this doesn't materialize for them and their average contributions are treated as just that, average, they might feel this contradicts the cultural promise of potential greatness for all. Resentment toward genuine expertise. Seeing others recognized for genuine expertise or brilliance might provoke envy or resentment in a midwit. They might not understand why those individuals receive accolades while their own insights do not, leading to feelings of being underappreciated or offended. Intellectual entitlement. Having been told they are smart or capable, perhaps through educational systems that praise all efforts, good grief, they might develop a sense of entitlement to recognition where anything less than acclaim feels like an injustice. When their mediocrity isn't treated as greatness, it clashes with their inflated self-perception, leading to feelings of offense. They might believe they're being held to an unfairly high standard or that the world fails to recognize true genius when they see it, not realizing that what they consider to be groundbreaking or noteworthy might be commonplace or lacking in depth to those more knowledgeable or experienced. Holy crap.
Elon,
I'd be really curious to know what ChatGPT would say to that same prompt.
Yep. Yeah. Elon won't recognize my gender pronouns. He and all of his rocket ships and his giant social media platform and all of his car companies and AI and everything needs to be torn down because how dare. That's what drives this. Let's call this because there are midwits that are benign, that are, they are what they are. They're not a risk. But what separates the manifesto midwit from the garden variety is they look at this and they think, how dare society not treat my mediocrity as greatness? And they want to tear it all down to the level of their mediocrity in order to validate themselves. And that is a hidden danger that we are facing and have been facing that I think is very ill understood.
Okay, so I need to get wrapped here because I got to prepare for a road trip tomorrow and get some episodes set up for that. But I think where do you think we should go with this in the next installment of this? I mean, it seems like one of the things is talking about like a new aristocracy, like developing a new aristocracy, and the tradition, the American tradition of aristocracy that's we've kind of lost, that's fallen away from us a little bit. What else? What other things do you think we could get into?
I think we could definitely get into the discussion of breaking down what makes different collaborative approaches effective, some of the tool sets and approaches. And again, we sort of broke down, well, what are the characteristics that wokeness sort of brings to the table that allowed it to become effective, right? Mm-hmm. We could talk about how do we take those characteristics and build new tools and new, some of it is tools, but some of it is simply awareness, right? Because I think, as we pointed out last time, we've all kind of been going through this process of learning to collaborate, right? We've all kind of been learning to use social media and to use many of these tools to connect with like-minded people, to spread ideas. But it's I think a little bit of conscious direction and understanding some core principles will help us kind of be a little more conscious and aware of it. And I also think looking at opportunities, sometimes the right idea lingers in the air can be 10 or 15 years, right? Take the example that I had earlier where I said this BlackRock executive is saying, my God, in the last year or two, crypto adoption is exceeding the internet and mobile phones, right? Well, 12 years ago, that wasn't true, right? What factors are driving adoption of a trend that have emerged in the last year or two? And some of that might be inflation. Some of that might be social factors. Some of that might be people seeing existing systems not work. So I think looking at what are opportunities for us to strike while the iron is hot, and I think there's some historical parallels that we can discuss here. But yeah, I think this was a great conversation.
Yeah, excellent. Let us know whether you're listening to this live now or if you're catching it later on YouTube or on one of the podcatchers. Let us know what you thought of this one. And if any of the things anything we've discussed, if you have questions or commentary or you have other things you want us to get into anymore, it looks like we're going to have probably multiple more installments of this series. I'm really enjoying it. Emergent, let us know where people can find you, where they can follow your work.
Oh, best place to find me is on X @_emergent_. But there I have in my bio, I have a link tree. So I do have a Substack. I do have a YouTube channel I started. So if you need to find me on my X profile and then go to the link tree and follow me on everything there. So yeah. And by all means, reach out to me if you got any questions or further discussion. But I really appreciate your time. And thank you to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. All the links should be in the description, the YouTube description, or in the podcast description later on. Do me a favor, folks, and support the show. Buymeacoffee.com/KingPilled. If you want just send some no strings attached cash, or you can join the KingPilled Discord at KingPilled.com, where you get to watch these members only streams without even being a YouTube member. And also go to KingPilled.substack.com. And I've got the KingPilled Substack up and running now, and I'm going to be publishing episodes there. So subscribers will get early access to the audio podcast when it drops. And then the video podcast should drop on YouTube later this week, because I will not be doing an astrolabe. I don't think for the rest of the week. I might be able to squeeze one out one of these days, but plan on not having an astrolabe the rest of the week. But I've got some stuff here in the hopper to push out for people. So I appreciate you guys showing up and listening in. Thanks, Emergent, for coming on and doing this. And pray for everyone down in Florida. I have a little sister who lives in East Central Florida, so I'm fairly concerned. I just heard from Amy that Hurricane Milton has achieved a minimum central pressure below 900 MB. I'm not sure exactly what MB would be. This is only
I think that's millibars.
Millibars, yeah, that's what it is. It's only the third time on record that this has occurred in the Gulf of Mexico. So, yeah, it's going to be a whopper. So pray for everyone down there. Be prepared to send support and aid and help out, because we've got the North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina front, and it looks like now we're going to have another front where we need to be able to bootstrap our fellow Americans out of a crisis period, because the federal government's not going to do it. And I'm going to say it, you got to vote in November. You got to vote. Even if you don't think it counts, do it anyways. It's a small thing. It's a very small thing. Costs very little, but it's a potential first step in building our own Hanseatic League. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey, thanks, everybody.